Welcome to Silver Scraps episode 2, right before week 2 of ZGG IBS Split 8 Spring 2021. As always, I am here, the wonderful Leper Koopa. I have with me in some direction Colonel Cannon. In another direction, I have Tex, and in yet another direction that I don't know where to point, we have that Decker guy.
I love. We're just gonna do that each week, where you just point at the wrong person.
Just guess.
And I'll just keep forgetting to add nameplates so that no one will know who anyone is. That's.
I mean, it works. It works, especially if we then 1 week put the nameplates matching where I point, rather than
my name is Colonel.
than to what their actual name is.
For the viewers' sake, Colonel is above me. Texas diagonal, and Leper introduce himself, so you know who he is, and I'm Decker. So
I don't think I can convince anyone of being anyone else because I am the most babyface on the
We were talking about how old we think you are and how old you could pass for, and I don't know how old you are, but I think you could probably pass for at least 18. Like 18.
Yeah, I'm 19 right now. So.
Oh, okay.
So I was off because I said
you were so wrong.
I was gonna say mid to late 20s, honestly. Like
it's because every time I talk to you guys, I make old jokes because I'm the oldest in terms of ZPG. So.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing.
It's not even that. Like, you just carry yourself in a manner where I just expected you to be older.
It's also the very deep voice.
The
very deep voice also helps with
very
that
deep.
Too.
Do I have a deep?
It comes through.
I guess I have a deep voice. We'll see.
So I will say
before
we get started, this is pre-recorded. We are recording today on January 30th. It's going to be broadcast on January 31st, just off of last week's Twitch stream. With the amount of people that asked this question many, many times, I'm gonna say that quite a lot more throughout the episode.
Yeah, yes, because Leper was in fact not both talking and typing in Twitch chat at the same time when it was getting broadcast last week.
No. And I can't always be there to participate in Twitch chat. We had a really interesting week though last week. We had how many? We had every series except one was a 2-0.
Mm-hmm.
And every series except one I would consider to be a stomp.
Absolutely. They were.
And it wasn't the 2-1 that was not a stomp.
Correct. I would definitely.
That was a hard sentence to say, but
yeah, they're not the same. The 2-1 and the series not a stomp are different series.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're gonna start by just showing a standings page, right?
Yes. We're gonna be that. We're on that now.
So in the Void, or Group A, depending on how you want to look at it, we had the 1-2-1. VBU versus the Fallen was a 2-1 in favor of the Fallen. Goon Squad versus Beyblades was a 2-0 in favor of Beyblades. CB Rookies versus Abyssal Emerald was a 2-0 in favor of CB Rookies. And I think we're just going to go from there.
I was in favor of Goon Squad, not Beyblades. Just want to correct you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you said it.
Rip Goon Squad.
So he's just conditioned.
You're not conditioned. I'm not letting you take this from us. So I want to just kind of ask the group, like, what was your most, and it could be a win or a loss, but what was your most from this group? The most surprising match of the week for you guys?
I don't think I'm going to be unique in saying that VBU Titanium versus Fallen University was maybe surprising is not the right word. I think I was surprised with how it came out. But I think it was the most interesting one, just from a thought-provoking perspective.
I would say it's also my most surprising, not necessarily because VBU lost, because that wasn't in the outside of the realm of possibility looking at these teams on paper, but how one-sided the series was overall.
Even though it was 3 games. That's the thing, right?
Oh yeah. Game 1 was like 40 minutes. It looked like a really, really grueling affair. And then the other 2 were like 25 minutes.
And it's important to note that the long 40-minute one was the only one that the Fallen lost. So when they lost a game, they held it out as long as possible. And when they won a game, they won a game.
They won it quick.
They closed it out sub 30
minutes. That
game.
Game 1 was the longest game of the week.
that's something that's going to be interesting to look at is because we've talked about stomps and we've talked about game length, right? Game lengths are pretty short, all things considered. Besides that 140-minute game, it's going to be looking at,
we had 4 series under 58-minute total game time.
just wild.
We had 3 teams, MIT, FTD, and CB rookies, all between 57 and 58 minutes in terms of total game time.
Yeah,
FTD was the fastest at 57 minutes and 8 seconds.
Trying to say something there.
13 seconds faster than MIT versus Crosspoint.
This is some quality math we're doing.
rivalry.
So I did all this math. I can't remember. CB rookies was closer to 58 minutes, but really, there were some really, really quick matches.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think from this group, my most exciting matchup is one of the ones we talked about a little bit. Is Goon Squad showing up with mostly the same roster, right? A couple minor changes. Well, maybe not minor. A couple changes. You got Skeleton coming in hot in the mid lane, and you got Salamandra Speak moving to top. It's just exciting to see this team pick up their first win in ZGG IBS.
Yeah, we were excited for sure. I mean, it was an exciting night for us. But who was it? I saw it in the Discord. Was it a couple days ago that dropped the gauntlet for a skin for the most kills in IBS?
Yeah, Kara did that again.
Yeah, so I think Skeleton's going to do his best to wrap that up. He had a great week this week as far as numbers. My favorite thing about that match was that game 1 was just a team win. Like everybody looked really good, and then game 2, Skeleton did his Skeleton thing, and he just ran through everybody and killed everyone.
I will say we definitely will get to it more, but the Ivern was really, really surprising for me.
That was on
CB Rookie Swag. Sold out 2 games of
and
Ivern.
Popped off, right? Had great games.
Absolutely. He had the 3rd highest KDA in the league.
Yeah, well, and again, you're right. We'll get to it, but I still think he is my
jungler
benchmark for this group to me. Like he is such a just solid jungler, and Ivern is. I mean, Ivern is like mechanically not difficult, but playing Ivern in a team is not just the simplest thing in the world. Like he's very nuanced. It's not
even just on the Ivern player; it's on the team,
right?
As well.
Exactly, they have to play around him as well. But we'll get to teams more specifically later.
Well, speaking of which, do we want to? Oops, sorry. Go ahead, Leper.
Oh, I was just going to do the same thing that you do. We're both going to go for the transition there.
Yeah, let's do it. So our first one up is we have VBU Titanium is our first team on the list, and we've spoken a little bit about that already. That we were, they had probably one of the stompiest.
If we look at the second 2 games in isolation, so if we ignore game 1.
Right.
Games 2 and 3 were the fastest 2 games of the entire week.
Were they? Yeah.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
And it's not like we're talking like the difference between FTD and MIT of like 20 seconds. We're talking like I think it's like at least a minute and a half shorter than the FTD series. So, like, the second 2 games were arguably the stompiest of the week.
Absolutely.
So, like, from my perspective, just looking at really long game 1, super quick games 2 and 3, it really looks like VBU cracked.
Yeah, like, I'm looking at gold graphs for each game, and the first game is all over the place, right? Bouncing back and forth, up and down. And just became it was just a grueling slugfest, right? Neither team really had anyone step up to like maybe the Syndra stepped up and showed up, but really it was games 2 and 3 where, like, as far as I understand, is mental and outplayed, right? Mental break, and then they got beat across the map, and it was it's interesting to look at these stats, right?
Yeah, that's
like
what it feels. Oh, sorry. Finish your thought.
No, I was just gonna say I'm looking at the jungler for Fallen, and they played what do I see? I see Sejuani and I see Kindred,
Sejuani, Kindreds, and Graves were
all
his
over
three
the
champs.
place, and
Yep.
they basically carried on Sejuani and Kindred in those 2 second games.
That's
with 2 totally
Botgod,
different
right?
playstyles.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Botgod had an 80% KP in that entire series. I mean, that's a crazy number for a 3-game series to be sitting
Yeah.
at that high. And
But we're here to talk about. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, but for VBU, it makes me think about like to put it in a real like a traditional sport analogy. I used to play tennis and being in those long, grueling tennis matches where you're in those long deuce back and forths, and then to finally lose that after 40 minutes of just back and forth, we can win, we're throwing, we're winning, we're throwing. That's when your mental is going to show if it's good or not, right? And it looks like VBU is showing a bit of weakness in that area of not being able to bounce back mentally after losing a game that they could have won. And just because I mean, we've said it already, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but those games 2 and 3 were not close.
Game 2 was the quickest game specifically of 24 minutes, 46 seconds. That's disgustingly quick.
That's rapid.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to give a little bit of a bright spot for this roster, I think Yasuo only and Timic is going to be a mid jungle duo that decides the success of this roster. In their only win, Yasuo only did really well on Yasuo mid, and Timic was on the Nunu to help out in the mid lane. And then in those games 2 and 3, they were really stompy, but the only people that seemed to be performing decently well were either Timic or Yasuo only.
Well, I'd argue too that the bot lane of VBU, particularly Reno, looks like he can still farm and he can still get his items going, even under that pressure. So in both games 2 and 3, Reno seemed to really be. They put all their eggs in the Reno basket, so to speak. Not that it fully got there, but there's definitely something there that I think is really good.
I think this team, one of the things that we're hinting at with what Colonel and Leper are saying is they've got the pieces, right? They've got the pieces to make it work. It's just, how are you going to handle losing, right?
Right.
That's the big thing.
I
How
agree,
are
because
you
I think
going-
if they shake off that game 1, and I mean, because they obviously can compete with Fallen, right? If game 1 was such a competition, they have the ability individually to compete, but they have to be able to shake that off and then reset for game 2. So if they can develop that, I think you guys are on point. They've got good pieces. They just have to work on calming themselves down and not falling into pressure.
And I know we'll talk about it a little more later, but this is a veteran organization. They have a lot of veterans. This is something that really, really shocked me that this was not there.
One of the things that's known about VBU is they have coaching staff. They have people to help run drafts. They have people to help run VOD reviews. They have resources dedicated to teams to help these guys grow. And I think, if you get stomped, one of the things that's great about getting stomped is you have very clear things that you can work on, right? There's probably going to be 1 or 2 things. Focus on this and come out next week and don't get run over.
And who do they have next week? I don't have that document.
So this week they are playing against you.
Oh, I
GSG.
should probably know that.
I will say this too. So and I know we'll talk a little bit about this later. I did not win a single series my first split in the ZGJ. I went 0-9 and I lost the first match of the gauntlet, right? When you lose like this, all expectations kind of go out the window, so you don't have anything to be afraid of anymore. The worst has already happened. You don't have to sit there and worry about the perceptions. So if they can think of it in that kind of positive way of there are no expectations, they can't get worse. You know what I mean? That they don't play scared, that they do go out there and put it all out there, that this really is a team that can turn around. They did that last split. I think I had, when we did the irrational prediction episode, I think I put VBU at 9th. I did not expect them to come out and turn things around the way that they did last split. So this is a team in an organization, and some of these players have been there before, that they know how to, or that they know that growth throughout the split and matters more than the initial result.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I
What
think
else you want to cover? Oh, go ahead.
I think this week, not only this upcoming week, which will be a very difficult week, going against GSG, but I think the next 2 weeks is going to be a big tell for VBU. If they look competitive against GSG and they can pick up a win, week 3 will be an important tell to see, can this team bounce back from this stomp.
They're front loaded, so they've got Abyssal in week 3 as a bit of a break, but then they go right back to CB rookies in week 4.
So I think building themselves up, I think GSG is going to be a hard one for them, but I think going into week 3 and getting some momentum to go into the CB rookies match week 4 is going to be the make or break for them to decide, can they still be a top level competitor.
I think we need to move on to the next team on our list, which I believe is the Fallen University.
It is
Yes,
their
sir.
opposition on the Rift for
Yep.
week 1.
This team should be going into week 2 excited.
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
They
yeah.
Absolutely.
Came out swinging. They've got marks across the board on this roster that are exciting to watch, right? Obviously, we're talking about Bot God, just stepping up on a variety of champions, on a
Disgusting.
variety of play styles, and just showing that he is one of the top junglers in the league, and the whole team played together. I'm interested to see what their bot lane does. Their bot lane showed a very specific style of play in the second 2 games, but they also, like, to go along with the theme with Bot God, they're playing a diversity of things, right? If I'm looking at this, they played Aphelios Lulu in games 2 and 3, and then in game 1
They played Aphelios in all 3 games.
Yes. Okay. It's the support then that I'm looking at.
It's
Which
the
is
support
the
that
Alistar and
changed.
Lulu, which is that variety, right?
Yeah.
I
mean,
and having success in all 3 of those games to some degree on that variety of champions, that's going to be interesting to see.
they have a formula. Like, looking at this, they like scaling. They like a jungler that's going to be able to impact the map, whether that's Kindred, Graves, Sejuani. They rely on Bot God to get things rolling. It looks like their top laner is, I mean, it's hard to tell when it's Alawi is kind of just running over the opponent. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's the new Feathers. It looks like
there we
The Alawi
go.
one trip.
Malphite and Alawi.
Feathers watch
Let's see
here.
if we get
Yeah.
Shogath or Gotten
I
Orc.
would say we need Cho'Gath and Urgot for sure.
Yeah. But this is a team that they clearly know what works well for them. Young Rich Boy, Anivia, Rise, and Syndra, 3 scaling good mages, like, they know how they want to play, they know how they want to draft. And I'll be honest, I was not expecting that kind of consistency in draft out of them in week 1. That this is very unexpected to me.
And I have to stroke my own ego a little bit, just a tiny bit. But I totally call it Bot God being the player to watch. This man looked really, really good, and he looked really good on a variety of picks. He looked great on Kindred. You have to be being aggressive with your laners to invade to get those marks. He played a great game. Him and his mid laner were the bright spots in their first loss on a power farmer like Graves, and also Sejuani, who's just playing for your lanes, playing to get everyone ahead, become this meatball in the late game. It's a variety of styles, and I'm glad that he proved me right. And I also totally called that mage players were going to have a resurgence, and the Anivia main, yes please, destroying. He went 8-1-9 in their game 2 bounce back on Anivia, and then performed really well on all of his mages. He was the only one, or him and his jungle were the only ones that looked good in their loss. So I'm excited to see what Young Rich Boy can do going into week 2 and beyond.
It's unfortunate that we don't have more to talk about with this team, because, like, I'm really, really hyped for this team.
Right.
And
as the weeks go on, we'll have more and more.
We'll definitely have more.
But
they're going up against Beyblades coming up. It's going to be an interesting see if they are they going to beat their fastest time, right? Are they going to speed run?
Are they going to speed run IBS, right? Yeah. No.
Are there any final thoughts on this before we jump into the next team?
This is gonna be. I think we're gonna see it more in both groups, but definitely with the appearances and the performance of Fallen University and some other teams that we'll get to in the other group that weren't necessarily as expected or weren't as sure of.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of battles at the top end, and I'm really, really excited for it because I think this team is going to be able to stack up against Goon Squad, is going to be able to stack up against CB rookies, and with the way that the format works, getting top seed is a big difference between getting second seed.
Oh yeah.
And getting third seed is a big difference than getting fourth seed.
Right. And because, I mean, they played against VBU, it's just the opposite from what we talked about with VBU of like, they lost, like Fallen lost that grueling game, right? And then just bounced back like a champ. I mean, I don't know about you guys. To me, it's easier to bounce back from a 25-minute loss than a 45-minute loss. But so I'm proud to see a team of players that I've never seen before. I mean, it's like take a hard loss after a long, grueling loss and then bounce back with just a slap. So.
Oh, yeah.
Let's jump into. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to do the same thing. So
we should designate one of you as the jumping enterer.
Tex, you did it last split, so you do it.
I'll do the. Let's move on, guys. I'll crack the whip.
So we got Abyssal Emerald.
This team, we called it. I think I was the one that was hyping it up. Jason KB23 clearly performed well, even in this. He played Kale. He played my brain's dying, and he played Oriana. Not going to say that he sit here and say that it was the greatest performance, but he was definitely the standout player in both of these games for his team. Upwards of roughly 7 CS a minute plus in both games, which is not insignificant when you're looking at such a one-sided series as this, And I will say, too, that there definitely looks to be a lot of potential on the bot side here. T1's Forehead and Cyber Age Oyami. Again,
great name.
Yeah.
It is quality.
One-sided, but at the same time, it's like you're looking at it and you're going, there's something here. There is growth here. There is potential. There is something. And so a lot of it seems to be, how can Abyssal Emerald figure out a way to make it work? As we've seen in Gold, too, teams that know how to make their stuff work oftentimes will overcome individual skill as a result of knowing how to play the map, of knowing how they're going to pilot their composition, knowing their timings.
Is this roster with who's on it and where they're sitting on the spread? Like, is that what it's going to
So this week, from talking with some of them, is the roster on the sheet is the ideal roster.
Okay.
So Jason being the top laner, and the person that we did not play this week, Only Magical Girls, being the mid laner. From what I understand, that person, Only Magical Girls, is on vacation, so we have not yet seen them play. So Jason was just filling in there.
Gotcha.
So things may change for real with their proper setup.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you. I do really think that this will be the more important showing now that they have this mid laner, because I think Abyssal's in the right direction. I think Jason and T1's Forehead, great name by the way. I think these two are your pieces to play around. I think having good performances in what was a really stompy series is impressive, because it's hard to do that when you lose these games that quickly, and keeping those pieces and trying to find better fill-ins around those two pieces are going to be where you find success, and making sure that Jason's where he's most comfortable, making sure T1 stays in this roster, and making sure the mid lane or jungle can play with them and build around them is going to be how this roster finds wins.
And kind of like we mentioned too with VBU, they're coming up against Fallen University this week. It's the streamed match. I'm excited for it because we'll actually get to see Fallen and Abyssal on stream. We'll actually be able to have tape to review.
I'm a little terrified of it because
I will also say here we are pre-recording this on January 30th. This is not live. I'm not going to be typing in Twitch chat and having this conversation at the same time. Also, if you want to give us more information, please send us raffle files. We are happy to look at them and be able to see more of what's going on and have a better idea of what's happening rather than just going off of match histories and stats. All of that being said, they're up against Fallen University this week. It's going to be rough. It's a hard team based on week one. The telltale match again is going to be week 3 when they go up against VBU. That's going to be a real make or break match for Abyssal. It's going to, I think, be really important for both teams because I definitely feel that they are not going to be favored today.
It's a battle of momentum, right? It's like one team has it, the other team doesn't. It's early in the season. We don't know. Crazy stuff can happen. And I'm sure we'll know by the time this is airing what the starting lineup for Abyssal is going to be. Hopefully we will. Yeah. But we might see some changes. Some people coming back to their. So you said Jason is supposed to be their top laner. Is that correct?
Jason is supposed to be their top laner, and we have not seen their intended mid laner. Only Magical Girls yet.
So I think top lane was a weak point in their match this past week. So moving someone that had such a good performance this week into that position and bringing in hopefully a stable mid laner, that could change the entire dynamic of the game, and we could see a big upset. But I would not put my money on Fallen dropping this game personally.
Let's jump into Beyblade's Let It Rip.
So this is this team has had some roster changes since then. What we have here on the slide is their current intended lineup, right? This is not what they played with. They played with Commander Killer in the jungle, and they played with CCG IHF as the mid laner.
Which was more toward their roster that they scrimmed with over the all
That
season.
Was the roster that they scrimmed with, yeah.
Yeah, so they made some changes coming into week 1. You know, I don't personally know why. Leper, maybe you know, but
I don't know. I just know that these are the changes that they made after playing GSG.
Ooh, Colonel has the scoop.
Yeah, so Willow wasn't able to make last week, and now he's going to be here, which means that he's able to play. So it was scheduling more so than anything.
Okay.
And that's exciting for me because if you guys remember last week, he was my player to watch. I think Commander Killer is definitely a mid laner at heart. He struggled in the jungle, but with not only a stable jungler, but again, I think one of the higher tier junglers. I'm excited to see what Commander Killer can get done in the mid lane against what is probably going to be a pretty important match for them.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys think this is one of the teams that we still need to feel out, right? Like, I feel a lot of it feels like half the teams are still there's a lot of unknowns to them. CBR, Fallen University, like while they came out swinging and there's a lot to know, there's still a lot more to learn. I feel like with Beyblades, to what we're talking about with the roster changes and as performance, they might be a quantity that we still have a lot to learn about.
Well, to contrast them like this, so from org versus org, if you want to think of it this way, these were bottom teams last split. First to Frontline was the previous iteration of Beyblade's Let It Rip. Goon Squad Gaming was Goon Squad Gaming. These were not great teams. The only remaining player from First to Frontline to Beyblades is Stone Poet. So they've done a full rebuild. There's a lot of questions. Now, there are some bright spots, like CCG Nap and versus Salamander Speak was arguably, across the entire league, the closest matchup in both series. Definitely came out favored in one way, But if you looked at the two players in isolation, you might not necessarily know who won. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I also think that Nap is somebody that I'm really excited for. I think in the top lane, Salamander Speak is one of those top laners that coming in from last split to this split, we were expecting him to be top tier. We're expecting him to be one of the best, if not the best. So to be that competitive against him is exciting. I think Beyblades has a lot of really good pieces, and I'm interested to see how they can put them together and if they can put them together.
It's a similar story to Abyssal, right? They have pieces. They clearly have pieces. It really is a matter of how does the team, how does the org guide them to fitting it all together.
And getting your players back into their actual roles is a good start. You know, like having. I mean, because when we were doing our preparation for Pickban, it was like, man, like some of these players just don't play the role at all. So getting your commander back into the mid lane. And we scrimmed against Willow Haven, I believe, during the boot camp, and he was a good jungler. They were a good jungler. So I am optimistic. And again, help me, I don't have this doc up. Who are they? Who do they have this week?
They have this week. They are goodness. I've tabbed away from
CB rookies.
CB rookies.
I need a fourth monitor. I think I need to have more space.
With this matchup, I'm interested in seeing Chef Boy versus the Beyblades top lane that we were just talking about.
Yeah, that should be a good matchup.
That should be good.
Nap.
Because I definitely just kind of in my heart, right? I feel that between Chef Boy, between Nap, between Sal, that's your top 3 top laners in the league. That's my gut. I'm not. Raymond from Fallen is definitely a candidate up there,
or at least in this division, right?
In this division,
right.
I mean, I'm going to say this division. Definitely. I want looking at that top lane matchup because I think it's going to be really, really important that if Nap gets ahead of Chef Boy, that can change the dynamic because Chef Boy really, really dominated.
Yeah.
Really dominated in week 1.
Let's take this chance to any final thoughts before we jump into the next team? Because I think it's a good
I
transition.
think we have it mostly covered.
I think we do.
Jumping on, talking about Chef Boy and his CB rookies, whatever CB may mean.
CB rookies, and I'm. This is me. There's some definite bias here. This is not trying to say that they are a bad team. I need more.
I'd agree with that. I mean, I feel like their first game was binary, right? There wasn't a lot to take away from. One team was definitively better than the other. Where the information that we can glean from how, like, on a scale of how much better and comparative to other teams, it's hard to tell. And it's not just that they stomped; it's that most of the other games were stomps too.
If I had to put like a definitive ranking, right, in terms of like tiering, you get what I mean? I would have to just based off of reputation and the perceived weight of teams, if you want to think of it that way, I would have to put Fallen University above both CB rookies and GSG because from my end, Abyssal Emerald and Beyblades were much big question marks and unknown factors than VBU Titanium was.
Yeah, I'd say GSG and Fallen's 2-0s were more telling. I think CB rookies getting the 2-0 is a little less. It doesn't esteem as much confidence because they were against such a big question mark. But
and a question mark that didn't even have their starting roster.
Yes, exactly. But that being said, I would love to see more from them, but I don't need any more. I'm already on the CB rookies hype train.
Oh, there you go.
Very excited.
When you have arguably and quite possibly, and I'm going to say it, the league, not just the division, one of the best junglers in the league. You've got a mid laner that's popping off, right? You've got a strong bot lane. You've got statistically the top laner that performed the best across. Well, no, I can't say that. The second best top laner across the entire league last week, right? It's hard not to be hyped for this team.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Swag was my my player to watch in this group. I think I liked Swag a lot last split, and I think him picking up the Ivern, right, and just rolling through 2 games on Ivern, and it was pretty fun. That would have been a game. Yeah, I would have loved to watch
really well.
Of watch that game. Please give us your .rfl files, please. But these solo laners, just from this limited data, we keep quantifying it, but I do think it's important to keep saying this is obviously limited data. We're not saying that your team is good or bad. We don't know much, but their solo laners look disgusting, and having a jungler that can enable solo laners is scary. So I think this team is on paper they look absolutely cracked, and I'm excited to see them play.
I'm still a doubter. Not that I discredit their ability. On paper, I agree. On paper, to me, they're not yet a proven quantity because their first week matchup, and for me, because of their week 2 matchup. In the first 5 weeks, they've got so obviously they started out against Abyssal, and then next week they have Beyblades, and then the week after that, week 3 is where I'm really interested in seeing what happens against Goon Squad Alpha, and then in week 5 against the Fallen University.
So
those are the 2 weeks that I'm really going to be like, all right, my opinion is going to be solidified probably by that point.
So historian moment here. The comparison that I can make in terms of how I feel about CB rookies, and part of my big question mark is I can compare them to last split's gold team, Astro Andromeda. If anybody remembers that team, not everybody pays attention to gold from an IBS perspective. This team fucking stomped the entire split and ran up into a BO5 in playoffs and fell short, right? That they never got tested. They never got challenged. And when they were in that situation, when the money was on the line, they fell short. Now, it took the 5 games. I'm not trying to sit here and say that Astro Andromeda was a bad team. They were an amazing team. One of the best teams in the league. But that's my question with CB rookies, is how are they going to handle being tested? It's why RAR last split surprised me. And ultimately, I think that a lot of the reason that RAR was successful last split is that they never really were tested, So if they do get tested, if somebody does stand up to CB rookies, that's the growth. That's the question mark for me.
All right, on to our anime protagonists, Goon Squad Gaming Alpha. What are our thoughts, guys? This team coming in
from not to top is kind of a big swing, right?
Very big swing.
Skeleton 1EX was one of the statistically best players of the week. Salamander showed up, Borby showed up, everybody on this team showed up, right? Again, against a question mark. Like I want to see Goon Squad against another team that we consider to be the top. Week 3, Goon Squad versus CB rookies, streamed match. I'm super hyped for. Super hyped for.
It's gonna be big.
It's gonna be a big match. Probably, in my opinion, the first real big match of the split as far as streams go. So this week they're against VBU.
2 teams on opposite ends of the spectrum here.
Right now, one team has the momentum working for them. One team has the momentum working against them. So it's a big question, right? And I hope for GSG that the momentum can keep going. I hope for VBU that they can overcome their issues right now, right? Like, Goon Squad just impressed. I'm not even gonna lie. I was expecting them to be good. I was expecting them to be on form. I really was not expecting them to be just slightly above what we talked about earlier, that 57-minute range. They were in the 58 to 59-minute range, right? Like, it's not.
They were worse.
They were just worse than that quickness, right? Like, it's hard.
I want to jump in real quick and give Colonel and Decker a chance to throw their thoughts out there. Colonel, do you have anything that's standing out to you about this GSG squad and what their futures look like?
Yeah, I think I was the big believer in the comeback story for mages in the mid lane, for control mage players. I think CB Rookies was a good example. Little Rodney, Anivia mains for the win. But Skeleton is the heavy outlier in the Void group. He absolutely popped off on, I think, Yasuo and Echo, and his Echo game was really, really the closest that in this split that I've seen a player go to 1v9. Yeah, it was just everyone was like, "Hey, is Skeleton someone we could deal with?" And the answer was no. He just won. So I think Skeleton, I had high hopes for him. I've seen him in scrims and perform really well in scrims, but expectations being high, he still managed to blow them out of the water.
On average, he does a third of the team's damage himself.
That's wild. Absolutely crazy.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, the way I've characterized Skeleton, I've told him this too, is we had a conversation about this the other day because we were talking about why he doesn't climb in solo queue, even though like he has the mechanics to climb out of silver, but he just like hasn't ever been able to do it. And what I told him is that the way you play is that you play like you are 20-2 all the time. So if you're 1-3, you're still playing like you're 20-2, and you're just jumping into people and dying. But those games when he does click and he is 20-2, he's gonna murder everyone. But if he gets behind, he just throws himself into teams constantly, and if it works, he's gonna hard carry, and if he doesn't, he's just gonna die. Like,
and
that's
a big point of question mark for GSG, because obviously I think they look the best team in this group. But to throw in just a little bit of doubt for that one game where Skeleton doesn't get ahead, for that one game where a team is able to shut him down, can the rest of GSG not only hold up but hold Skeleton up high enough to overcome that? I'm not yet completely on this hype train because I don't know if Skeleton gets behind, can this roster still perform?
Yes, and that's the question mark for sure. And with a little bit of insider knowledge, this is one of the, again, I'm gonna say it 10 times this podcast. Send us your .rfl files, please send them to us, because if you watch those files, so like we were down in gold in game 1 at 15. It was small, but we were still down, around 400-ish gold at 15, game 1, and Skeleton wasn't particularly ahead. Like he was even to down is what I would say. And but the team is really good at holding the game. I mean, that game in itself was a very long game. The team is very good of just like holding the line, and Borbies in particular is very good at creating pressure elsewhere to give Skeleton time to catch up. And he did Yasuo things eventually when he farmed enough to get his items. Then he became, I think he was like 6-3 and something in game 1. But
6-4-16 at the end of the game.
6-4-16, yeah. So and then I think Borbies ended up being like 9-0, and I should have all the stats up.
Yeah, Nunu seemed to be one of the common picks of the week. Interestingly enough,
yeah. But I think we have that ability. But I am with you. I am interested in the game where Skeleton doesn't just get set behind, but he gets absolutely shit on, and then we see if the rest of the team can hold up. But it's going to be hard to do that.
Absolutely.
Minor correction: GSG's time was closer to 1 hour 10 minutes. My bad.
I think seeing in this week Yasuo only versus Skeleton is going to be interesting with their champ pools, their play styles, I'm going to fight like I'm 20-2 at all times. It's going to be interesting. It could be the tipping point for VBU to really get back on track, or it could be Goon Squad solidifying the fact that we're here to stay and we're here to kick some ass. I want to make sure that we're moving on to our next segment here, looking at the Shadow Isles. Are there any final thoughts before we jump into the Shadow Isles?
I think that right now, I think that my initial thought on the Void is kind of correct. That there's going to be a very, very clear top and a clear bottom, and there's going to be battles in those sections and not a lot of transition between the two. I'll be honest. And I don't, from what I've seen in week 1, I don't see that changing too much.
Mhm.
Alrighty. Let's jump into the Shadow Isles. We've got Arc Quake, Monkeys in Training, and Feed the Dream Black sitting tied at first. Tied at second, we've got Subversive Gaming, Crosspoint Koalamus, and Revolution
Which we don't
IBS.
know how to pronounce.
We have learned how to pronounce, and it's not based on koalas at all.
No, it's the Greek god of stupidity.
Which is interesting.
So while we had in what in my opinion was one of the stompiest series with the VBU Titanium versus Fallen University, and the other series we had, in my opinion, the closest series of the week with Arcquake versus Subversive.
Absolutely.
And it was a 2-0 in favor of Arcquake.
Right.
But it was still.
But just looking at the stats, like looking at the goal differential, everything, it was very neck and neck. It was definitely the most competitive series of the weekend, for sure.
Yeah. MIT showed that they, at least statistically, are the top team in the league.
Yes, sir.
We can put more question marks on them, similar to we have GSG and CB rookies, just because Crosspoint is a gigantic question mark. But yeah, this seems just like my kind of like we talked about just a second ago with the Void, where I feel that it's going to be split evenly. I think that Shadow Isles is going to be much more competitive top to bottom.
Absolutely. I think while the top teams are definitely showing that yes, we are a top team and we're here to prove it, I think a lot of the question marks and a lot of the potential mid-tier teams are very close to being able to contest. And I think seeing where rosters grow and which rosters sort of stagnate throughout the middle of the split is going to be a good tell to see who actually makes it out into playoffs.
I would agree. It's a series. It's a group where like my gut says that dropping one game can mean a huge difference.
Oh yeah.
I was gonna say every single win you get in this is gonna be big. It's gonna be impactful towards the final standings. Let's jump into Feed the Dream Black here. What about this matchup against Revolution IBS, where they went 2-0, stands out to you guys?
The fact
Dan
that
cannot carry alone.
What stands out to me is the fact that we don't have Leper in pajamas. I'm really upset. We had a chance for something amazing to happen here, and it's just not, and I'm not okay with it.
We'll get around to it. We'll get around to it. At some point it'll happen. I have faith in our roster. I have to agree that with Leper that Dan showed up in laning phase.
Dan shit on me. Don't even lie. Don't like game 1. Dan fucking destroyed me. There is no other way to say that. So I'm not. Now I got revenge in game 2, but that's a different.
Yes. There's a point. So I got the chance. Doc and I got the chance to cast it internally, like for we streamed the game, and there's a point where a fight was engaged. Like they Dan on Yorick engaged a team fight. He started a team fight using the cage, and I was like, "What is happening?
It's hard to do.
What is this?" It was, to me. I have some thoughts on this matchup. I think one of the strengths of Feed the Dream Black is their cohesion as a unit, their ability to transition what leads they do have into the mid game. Because what's one of the things that I think they were lacking was laning phase advantages on the top and bottom side of the map early on. But when it came to that mid game team fight, it was consistently between 12 and 15 minutes. The game just flipped and it was full steam ahead. My highlight player was Chubby. Chubby Chernobyl was an absolute monster in both games.
Yeah, and he was my player to watch last week for this group. I think Chubby is an incredible player. I do want to highlight, though, that there are 2 players that have managed to get through week 1 without a death. and one of them is Nerf Snugglebutt. So I want to see how long. The other one is MIT's top laner, I believe.
Yeah,
correct.
So I want to see what team can hold on to that deathless streak the longest. So I'm interested to see will
I don't
Nerf
think
die. That was what I want to know.
either of them will. Yes, I think so, because the two teams that have no deaths are against each other.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's exciting.
That's sad. That's
I don't
big
think either
sad,
of them are going to
honestly.
come.
That's big sad for me. I really
Yeah,
wanted
it
to
really
was it last year where Sven went like 8 games or something in LCS without a death?
Yeah, he had like something like a 70 KDA.
I
Because
just
he
want that to happen.
Decided
like Nerf is currently breaking the function in my stat doc to calculate KDAs, and I want him to keep doing that.
That's fine.
So another random note: in both games, FTD had 2 deathless players. Vinny Sucks season 11 didn't die in game 1. In game 2, I did not die. This was just across the board kind of a thing. I have to give shout out credit to the Merit Lodge, just because compared to a lot of the other junglers, much more like objective control, farm oriented.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely something where the kind of impact that a player like that has is underrepresented, because they're not all over the map. They don't have the insane KPs, but they're providing function more as a secondary carry than they are as like a tempo controller, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. My player to watch is going to be Vinny. I'm unsure if I want to say that how well he performed is mostly on him or mostly down on Lynx. I think Lynx had a really tough week, and I think the big tell is going into week 2. Is Vinny gonna continue to pop off like he did in week 1 when he's against, I think, arguably stronger competition? Or I mean, no, just a tiny bit of bias, but I think the big tell is going to be, can he stand up to what's probably the other top tier team in this division in terms of mid laners, or is that going to be a spot that falls off when he has more competition?
Well, I'm going to say this just because I have the advantage of information here.
Yes, you do.
Because Chinese Spy was competing with Vinny for this spot. That match has been very one-sided over time.
Interesting.
Time to flip the script.
So we'll see if Mr. Spy can flip the script.
Decker, did you have something you want to say?
Yes, this is I'm not letting this go. We have 2 representatives from both these teams next week.
Do.
So I just think we roll the wager over to this week. I think that's what we do.
Can't shave no beard.
Yeah.
Well, I am perfectly willing that if FTD loses, that I will appear on episode 3 of Silver Scraps in my kitty pajamas.
See,
not your kitty pajamas. Shaved beard.
No, Colonel, what you need to do is you need to get a fake beard to wear.
Yes, that's what it is. If MIT loses, you need to put on a fake beard for the next. Do your best Hagrid cosplay.
For you.
All right.
Awesome.
That sounds like a plan. I think.
All right, Chinese Spy, don't let me down.
So we've got two of the most veteran orgs and 2 of the most storied and decorated orgs coming in, hitting head to head at a time where I think we were talking about this at one point, where they're both on sync, right? They're both in sync in terms of they're at their peaks, right? FTD's coming in with high expectations. They met those expectations, taking down what was one of the strongest rosters one of the strongest orgs last split in Revolution, and they're showing that they're ready to compete at every level across the roster. MIT is coming in saying, last split was a fluke. We're rebuilt, and we're coming here to put the hurt on. And I'm excited for this week 2 matchup.
This isn't the stream game, is it? Or is
No,
it?
Unfortunately not.
It needs to be streamed somewhere.
We are, if you were interested in streaming.
Yeah. I mean, we'll We'll put it on the GSG stream if you need to, because I mean this is gonna be a hype. This is gonna be a hype match, and I want to watch it. I really do.
Let's move on to our next team here. We want to jump into Arc Quake.
All I gotta say is Phoenix showed up. This was not a player that we talked about. This was not a player that we mentioned at all. And this guy absolutely showed up and was a huge factor in this series. Like, if there was a clear area where Arcquake won in both games, it was in the mid lane. Another mage player played 2 games of Igar. But this guy absolutely showed up and really, really clearly was the stronger mid laner in the series.
To be fair, we actually did talk about Phoenix, and I have to give him so much credit. We talked about him as a potential weak spot. We talked to him and said, this guy has 600 plus games of Lux. As soon as it's banned, he's gonna drop.
It was a lot of Lux.
Yeah.
And it's still a lot of Lux. He apparently.
But he proved us wrong, right? I mean, he did. He showed us up.
Yeah, but to be honest, it's reminded me a lot of Ball Slap on MIT eons ago now. He's been in gold for what, 4 seasons?
All of last year. I played against Ball Slap in my first split, and I got destroyed.
Yes.
So I am familiar with the legend of Ball Slap.
So a one trick of this caliber, when you're so good at your champ that you can, every day of practice, every day of scrims, every day of games, you can play other champions, get them up to an incredibly high level, and your whole team is opened up by having this necessary ban. It's like every time you play them, your team has to ease up because you lose a ban because Lux has to be off the table.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for
very powerful.
For the day that somebody doesn't ban it, Phoenix is just going to say, "Oh well, thank you very much. We'll take the 2 out." But so it's really amazing to see that one tricks tend to have a bad connotation, but flipping it completely on its head for Phoenix.
In the history of IBS too, there's some players that have like succeeded with this model, and some that haven't. Probably even more famous than Ball Slap in that way. The most famous player like that, and even in gold, this is true, is Feathers. You have to, like, there is a clear, predictable pick ban with Feathers, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a formula that exists every time I see Feathers play in any league, on any team. And every time you let, it's very, very rare that I see Feathers get his Alawi or get his Urgot, and that fact not be punished. And so it's one of those things of, if Phoenix does get that Lux and it doesn't happen, that's when things get really, really scary.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, is there going to be a team that's going to say, okay, play Lux. Let's see what happens.
Right.
And if they beat that, that can completely change the entire dynamic.
And not just for that match, but for the future.
For the entire team, for the entire split. That's going to change.
That changes so much.
So I'm curious to see what team is the team that says we'll take the bait. We think you're bluffing, and to try and test them on that bluff.
The other person that I really want to highlight, we talked a bit about them, but they definitely performed as well, is Captain Ryu. I'm not sure.
Sure.
Solo laners for Arcquake look really, really good. That's all I really got to say there.
Yeah, he looked really good. Just random fact, because I opened his OP, he just had a 24 1-in-10 Vayne game with a quadra kill. Just gonna put that out there.
Was it a top lane Vayne?
Yeah,
because I lose respect for players who play top lane.
Oh no, he's actually playing it in the bot lane, but I expect he can bring it in the top. But regardless, we knew this player was going to be good, and I'm glad that he took those expectations and ran with them.
Arcquake goes against the Crosspoint Gods of Koala Moss next
Yep.
week. Who's our next team that we want to talk about? I want to transition into talking
I
about these
believe
guys.
the next team we talk about is Crosspoint.
Exactly. Let's jump into it. What are your Decker? What are your thoughts on Crosspoint? What's sticking out to you right now?
So let's see. We learned how to pronounce their name, so that's a big factor. I'm getting their stats.
Huge,
I love the
huge factor.
Love it.
Let's see. Let me get them. So their game was kind of not telling. I mean, there's not a lot you can learn about the strengths of a team from just like a thrashing. Like,
Yeah.
Looking at like the stats objectively, there's potential. Maybe in the solo laners, like have had some, at least a little bit of some bright spots on it with Starwolf and Ghost. Is it Ghost Zero Pants or just Ghost Pants? And there happens to be a zero there.
I'm just gonna say Ghost O Pants and
Ghost
just
O
take
Pants.
two that the pants are invisible.
I just thought that the Ghost had zero pants. That's what I was going with. The Ghost Zero Pants. But there were some high spots there. They had some high KP on their mid and top laner. Top laner was one of the higher CSers. Red Panda capped it out, but it was all pretty tight. It's just gonna be we'll see if we can learn something this week. In my opinion, it's like we just didn't learn too much, I think, last week from them.
Since my roster was the one that went against them week 1, I have a little bit of an inside scoop because I did ask the players. I said, what did you guys think about them, and who are the people that you think are going to be the big difference makers on this roster? And the general consensus was actually King of Brawl in the jungle. A lot of Crosspoint, when they got down early, when they started losing laning phase, when they were solo kills, when they were massive ganks, like ganks straight after TPs, they started to roll over. They started to say, well, you got us. We'll let you have what you want. And King of Brawl was the only one that said, no, we can fight for this, and we should fight for this. We can't just let the game slow roll into a loss. We have to find a point and fight for it. And I think he performed decently well. His stats may not say it, but I think he's who I'm going to look at, if especially because he is in his first competitive split. This is his first season, so if he can start to grow and start to really fit into this vibes mold, then I think Crosspoint will find a lot more wins.
Remind me, Leper, are these all new players, or are there some returns
As
here?
far as I'm aware, these are all new players to be.
I love that, and I'm hoping that it's not taxing on them to play against what is arguably one of the best teams in the whole league in week 1 as a brand new team, and to kind of get thrashed. Just keep working on your team synergy and try your best to learn from it. I don't know if you have a coaching staff or not. Hopefully you do, and you can take some stuff away from it. But this week will be probably more competitive for them, I would say. Is that fair, or do you think that they'll have a more competitive week this week?
I don't know is the answer. I hope it's more competitive, right? I would argue that they have a better chance, of showing up, but I just don't know. That's the thing when something is this one-sided without like a clear standout or anything like that, I really have no idea.
I think this week is going to be a big learning for everybody about both of these teams.
Yeah.
And how they match up against the rest of the division. Because they are playing Arcquake, which is going to be an exciting matchup. With that, are there any final thoughts before we jump into one of the biggest teams?
That matchup, Arcquake versus Crosspoint, is going to be the telling for, is Arcquake a top tier competitor? Like, we see Feed the Dream, we see MIT as these two long-standing orgs that are now juggernauts in their own right. And can Arcquake come out 2-0 into, I think week 3 is their first time that they go up against one. Yep, where MIT is against Arcquake. If they can stand up to either FTD or MIT, then all of a sudden I think this roster becomes top 4. I think they they instantly become favorites to potentially even win it all. But it's gonna be a decider. Can they get this momentum going into the MIT match on week 3?
100%. All right. Well, speaking of MIT, the monkeys in training.
So I want to talk about a player that I don't think we've mentioned at all. And that is YMZI. First of all, how many ults does this man have?
So many.
It's insane how many this guy has.
I swear, it's every season he's just like, you know what? I'm gonna get another account.
We'll do this time. You know, this guy was freaking everywhere. I think across the 2 games, something like 42 assists.
Yeah.
Wow.
Everywhere on the map, doing work. I would imagine, I did not actually get a chance to look at this series, but if I went back and was actually watching it, that's where my eyes are. I want to see if this guy is rotating. I want to see where this guy is moving. I want to see what he is doing to be able to have such insane map influence, right?
And help me, I have Shadow Stealer as a support for this week.
That's YMCI.
That is his new account.
7 accounts.
My lord. All right, let me change that in my doc real quick. Hold on.
This player, I mean, he also, yeah, so similar to another support we were talking about previously, right? With that Lulu and Alistar variation. I think it was Fallen that we were talking about that.
Yeah.
Nami and Pantheon. 2 completely different playstyles, 2 completely different types of champions that play lane. Maybe there's some similarities, but generally speaking, it's just 2 polarized champions, and had equivalent success on both.
Yeah, he actually had, considering how different those are. Like Pantheon, you expect to just be trying to stomp lane and then trying to rotate around, and Nami being an enchanter, being the more passive of the 2, getting 2v2 kills in both games, and being the reason for those 2v2 kills is just sort of, it's honestly disgusting. There's very little that he can't do.
I am going to question Killistera's build choices. I mean,
I might have missed that. What was the
Which one did he do?
So in game 2, they finished the game with a collector and 2 daggers.
Yes.
I don't know exactly how Hydra and Hurricane function together on Callista. Don't know.
It's the secret tech, Leper.
It's the secret.
It might be a secret tech. I don't know. That's not something that I'm familiar.
This is. They played for Team Darkness Light in Split 5, and they didn't last terribly long, but their trademark thing was full lethality Xayah at the time. They're definitely an AD carry that likes unconventional builds. So I'm just kind of going question marks here.
Sitting here, I understand the question marks, but at the same time, I've learned just to not question it. What she builds is what she builds, and for some reason, not only does it work, but it really works. She stomps on what she builds with.
Right. And I'm not judging. Like, I'm just, it's a question mark, right? Like, how is that going to perform against somebody who is building, quote unquote, more optimally, right? When they're not stomping. You get what I mean? Like, that's when the questions come.
There's also a big highlight for me in the top lane, CS loves Wales. I think that, like, seeing a top laner go deathless is not normal. Top lane is a very exposed position a lot of the times, and seeing that is really promising. And I know that the games were both pretty stompy. I don't remember off the top of my head what the game time was, but it was pretty short, if I remember correctly.
30 minutes game 1, 26 minutes game 2.
So we didn't have a lot
the
of
same
time.
Stats from game 1 to game 2. Same KDA, almost the same farm, same gold.
It made it really easy to do the math. I'll say that. But his CS was one of the lower of the teams that won of this division. I think he might have had the lowest CS in the top lane for the teams that won their match. But 12-0-26 between two games it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
He had the highest KDA in the league in week 1.
Yeah.
Well, according to my stat, it's error. His KDA is error.
It's breaking the system, man. MIT's just out here to break the system.
You can't divide by 0 is his KDA.
According to Battlefy, it's 38.
It's pretty good.
So, from the inside perspective, I know we've touched on a couple players, but my big player to watch is Birdners. I think I'm very excited for him because it was very clear our struggles last split. Losing Doc was something that really devastated our roster for the entire split. And I think this is the first time that I could confidently say the era of Doc is over. And I really do believe that the era of Birdners is just beginning. This man played such completely different styles. He was another one of the Ivern connoisseurs, which I think he had a 25 KDA on.
He went from Ivern to Kayn.
And then he went to Kayn and had 17 kills?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So I'm very excited for him. The era of Birdners only just starting.
And they did have, I will highlight this too, they did have in game 1 of this match, they had the highest goal differential at 15 of any team with a positive 5,900 gold differential at 15, which is large.
I didn't even know that.
Which is large.
I do have to sit here and go, it's still a question mark, right? Kind of like CB rookies.
Wait, is it a question mark?
I don't think
know.
it is.
I don't know if it's a question mark.
Oh, is this Lepers? Here's where Lepers take differs.
I'm just being me, right?
That's okay.
If we are going to sit here and go, we're unsure about CB rookies. When CB rookies played a similar unknown.
That's fair.
Are we going to sit here and say the same thing about Monkeys? Now, is Monkeys a top team? I'm not going to deny that, just like we're not denying CB rookies, right? We're not denying those things. But does it have as much weight is the question.
And that just comes back to just like lack of data, right? I think that's
all that is.
Week 2.
I'm not even trying to deny that. Like I'm hyped to play this game.
Even week 2 won't tell us much because we have FTD and MIT, who again on paper are both strong teams. One of them's going to have to lose, and that team isn't suddenly going to be not a top team, right? They're still going to be a top team. So I think it's going to be. I think after week 3, which is when we plan to do our predictions,
irrational prediction episode.
I think after 3 weeks of play, that going into week 4 is going to be when we have an actual good idea of where teams are starting to slot.
Just end it right there. When we actually,
it's why we do the irrational predictions before week 3.
Exactly. So we want as little data as possible when we tell you who we think is going to win. But So I think that is a fair assessment that if we're going to question CB rookies, we need to question MIT. We need to question everybody at this point because it's when we could play. And again, I don't think that to make sure no one takes you out of context, I don't think that you at all were saying that you think MIT is a bottom team, but just
no, that's not what I'm saying at all.
We're just talking about, are they the best team in this league?
If we're going to say that Fallen University beating VBU weighs more than CB rookies beating Abyssal Emerald, we then have to say that FTD beating Revolution weighs more than MIT beating Crossplay. That's all I'm saying.
I would agree with this at week 1 right now. This may change, like we say, as
this may
time
change in
goes
2
on.
weeks.
Exactly. But right now, I'd have to agree. I think MIT and CB rookies fall into a similar camp. I think the unknowns are different and the knowns are different, right? Like the things that we know about CB rookies is one category of information. Things we know about MIT is a totally different style, different type of different category of information. And I think this week's going to be interesting to see both FTD and MIT say, here's how we're going to play the game. I want to see what happens at 12 minutes. I want to see what happens at 15 minutes in these games. And is it going to pivot hard, right? Is FTD just going to smash the gas pedal and run with it? Or is MIT going to be able to say, no, this is our game, right? I'm really interested in seeing what that dynamic looks like. I think there will be a lot to learn, but to Decker's point, it's going to be 2 of the top teams going up. Someone has to lose. We're not going to get a lot of
Right.
information necessarily.
I know we totally have to move on, but it just makes me a little bit happy that Vinny and Chinese Spy and Banter literally as we're talking about them
Oh man,
are going at it. Yeah.
are going at it. I think it's gonna be an interesting.
There's not a
week.
day that goes by that I'm not sad that I don't have the banter roll, or that I'm sad that I have the banter roll. I love not having banter. I live in a state of blissful ignorance where everyone likes everybody and we're just having fun playing a game we like. I'm just gonna assume that's what's happening all the time.
Honestly, from where I sit of having to deal with it, I'm with you. I wish I could.
It's great. It's a beautiful way to
I
live.
have to deal with. I don't directly moderate it, but I have to deal with the moderation of that, and it.
I enjoy it. There's nothing that makes it a little bit spicy except for banter.
So I think it's time that we talk about Subversive.
yes, let's get into it.
So
That bot lane though.
that bot lane though.
Yeah.
Snowy Face Shadowfax definitely showed up. Roland showed up. I'm not just gonna say that. Like Captain Rio looks like a top laner, like a top tier top laner. Roland showed up. He put up a fight. He had higher CS. He had significant damage, right? Like he didn't just roll over and die. Snowy Fae though looks like to be the standout player on this team.
Both Snowy Fae and Shadowfax, I think both just statistically in a loss, it's good. You know, putting up those stats in a loss, you're not super sad, right?
No.
These were long games too.
Yeah, they were both the 34 minutes for game 1 and 36 minutes, a little in change for game 2. They were tight. The gold dip at 15 was pretty tight both games. Towers taken, Dragons taken were all pretty tight both games. This might be. We talked about another. No, this is what we talked about, right? Being the most competitive.
This was the most competitive series.
And Snowy Flay and Shadowfax to me were definitely just like they both had really high KP. They, Snowy Flay is still sitting at a 7+ CS a minute average in 2 losses, which is good to see. Maintaining a decent KDA. Both of them had a decent KDA for losses. So I'm excited to see this team keep playing.
Well, the big thing that I want to say here, and this is just the way that it looks to me, is it looks like losing their mid laner took them by surprise, and they haven't stabilized from that yet.
I think Subversive is, and this matchup that we're talking about with them and Arc, right, is one of the strongest reasons why this entire group of 6 is hard to pin down.
Yeah.
It's hard to say there's a top and bottom right now, and I feel like it's going to be hard to say that going forward because each week I feel like there's going to be a lot of volatility. I mean, we talk about FGD and MIT next week. That's a volatile matchup. That's gonna mix it up, right? Every win's gonna mean something. I feel like with Subversive, when they get their feet under themselves, like if they're performing like this on the back foot, right? What's gonna happen when they're leading the charge, when they have the tempo and the mental and all this stuff, the momentum. I'm really excited for this team.
Oh, I am too. They definitely showed up. I really hope that they figure out exactly what's happening. You know what I mean? Took him a stepping up and taking the role of mid lane. And arguably that was the biggest gap between Arc and Subversive. That doesn't mean that this team is bad. That doesn't mean that this team is there.
Your strengths, right? Like
you have to. And Snowy Fae is your win con, without a doubt.
I would argue that as someone who's in this group, I'm a little bit scared of this team with the mid lane change. I think Roland performed so well, and obviously their bot lane. We didn't really talk about their bot lane week 1, but they're biting us for that because damn, we should have. But
right.
If they have a point of confidence in the mid lane, someone that they're sure doesn't roll over, then all of a sudden this team becomes a competitor for top in the group, in my opinion.
Before the name change, before the mid change, right? This was my dark horse pick for top team in the league.
Someone's got a phone call.
Yeah, no, that's my meds alarm. So, no. So, yeah, that was all I was saying.
Yeah. Remind me. This is my 10th time asking this. Who do they have this week, Submersive?
They play Revolution this week, and that's going to tell us a lot.
That's
about both teams.
Incredibly important matchup because we'll talk about Revolution in a minute, but both these teams suffering 0-2 losses, and whichever one that bounces back, both of them with roster changes as well. So whichever one of these roster changes is more impactful, whichever one of them can come up week 2, has a really good chance to stay competitive. But I have a feeling, as what often happens when you start out poor and then have your feet kicked out from under you from another bottom tier team in the standings, you start rolling. And I think it's hard mentally to keep on your feet, suffering bad losses.
Yeah, I want to jump off that.
It will be worrying for whoever loses this next matchup.
I do want to jump off that though. That like to the point that we've been making, it's gonna whichever team loses here, it's gonna be hard to bounce back. But I think it's gonna be really important for them to bounce back because it does not losing your first 2 weeks against the matchups that they've had, right? Whether it's Subversive or Rev that drop tomorrow, it's not doom and gloom, right? It's not the end of the split for them because the onus is going to be on them to step up and be like, okay, we have they're going to have excellent samples to figure out what's wrong, how they can fix it, and then how they can go into the next 8 weeks and make playoffs.
Right.
But flipping the coin to the less optimistic side, I think it's such an incredibly tough, from someone who was in that pair of shoes last split. It's a very tough mental battle when you lose, when you're already losing and then you lose to a bottom tier team. So if whichever team loses can keep their heads in the game, can say we do have strong pieces and we have games with evidence of exactly what is wrong, exactly what we need to fix, then all of a sudden this group becomes incredibly competitive with like five or six, to be honest, 6 teams that all can make a showing in playoffs.
Absolutely.
If they can. But if their mental's not in it, if they take that 0-2 start at the end of tomorrow or at the end of tonight and don't get back in their head, they stay in their heads, they stay a little bit weary, then all of a sudden it could be a snowball to a last split GSG kind of finish.
Whoever loses the match tomorrow needs to win one of the games. It needs to be a 1-2. I think.
A 1-2 is going to make a big difference, I think, for some of these players. I mean, let's talk about Revolution because we're talking about this back here.
I'm here for it.
You cannot talk about this team without talking about Denobi.
He's the rock. Like
this guy had in a 0-2 loss. This guy had the highest CS per minute in the entire league at 8.
Which is incredibly impressive. I mean, just like wildly impressive.
In game 2, he had 45% of his team's damage.
Wait, what?
As Mundo.
In game 2, he had 45% of his team's damage. Might be 42. Either way.
Denobi, blink twice if you need someone to get you out.
Right. Like, hey, what are you talking? He's fine. He's happy. He likes Revolution.
This team needs somebody to hold up Denobi. That is what the message was there.
So I've got some thoughts I want to bounce. I can bounce off that as being one of the people that runs Revolution. But I want to get a chance to hear Colonel and Decker. Sorry, I was thinking about the other people that run Revolution and the Doc. I want to hear what y'all's thoughts are before I jump in with some input on what Leper was talking about.
So I've always known Denobi. Denobi obviously came from MIT before starting or joining Revolution in their debut. And he's always been absolutely disgusting. I remember playing last split and getting my ass handed to me by Denobi more than a handful of times. And I think just getting like one extra person to not even to be strong, to just not lose next to Denobi is enough of a recipe to get some wins for Revolution. But my biggest query is going to be this support change. I think their ADC, while not having a good showing in week 1, is someone I'm excited for. And in a way I can't exactly describe, the numbers don't back me up, but I think with the right support, he can play really well. And if he can, all of a sudden Revolution comes back to this top tier team that we saw them in last split.
Jumping off of that, so to kind of bring, I have some responses to that to bring kind of both yours and Leper's points together here. So Lespanx in both games, Revolution had in the bot lane had CS advantages and was keeping even while they were losing lane. Right, they conceded level 2. Chubby Chernobyl was kind of running the map. Right, he had this giant ass backpack that all of FTD was in, and they were just running. And even through that, Lespanx was able to keep up farming, was able to have an impact, right? It wasn't like it was crazy like we saw with Snowfay, where like even in losing they were showing massive numbers. But I still think, to your point, yes, something on this map something on this roster needed to click to unlock Lespanx, to unlock Danobi, to unlock Zill, and from internals stuff, Fueled by Self Hate is the guy to do that, is the support to do that.
What a name.
It's a great name, and he's got a lot of energy. And one of the things that I'm excited to see is how he enables Zilliak, how he enables Lespanx, and how those two. So how having Fueled by Self Hate and Zilliak kind of running the tempo can transition Dan's consistent advantages in laning phase into that mid game, because that's really where they struggled. This team struggled against FTD was going into the 12 to 15 minute range. They just completely blew up, right? FTD just ran with it. But in those first 10 minutes of the game, it was really tight, if not in favor of Revolution in some spaces. A lot of it coming from Danobi.
It's an unfortunate thing where when you can clearly identify one player on a team where the bulk of gold, where the bulk of threat comes from, where like in the first game, it was Yorick, right? When you have all your gold on Yorick, that's not a good thing. Because then Yorick has to kind of be with the team. We'll see. I'll be honest, with some of the things that I saw, I don't know. I don't know if a support change is going to be enough.
It might not be, but I think it's going to be. I'm hoping that's a step in the right direction. I think this matchup against Subversive is going to be two mid laners who got. I want to talk about the mid lane. They kind of got outplayed in their respective week 1 matchups, and it's going to be interesting to see how that matches up, right? How both teams adapt, whether it's what tools they use to shore up that side of the map.
Yeah, I think just final thoughts on Revolution. We talked about a lot of different pieces, but the big question mark for me is Lynx. He's been in the scene for so long, now in a new role, but what happened week 1 can't happen again if Revolution wants to have success. He has to find his footing in a new role, in a new environment, with a new team, but he has to find his footing, and he has to find it fast. Otherwise, Revolution may have a tough year ahead of them.
All right. Well, we've gotten some thoughts in on all the teams. We've talked about some highlight players. Let's just wrap this up here and get our final thoughts on this week 2 coming up. What players are you looking at? What matchups are interesting? What storylines are really hyping you up?
So Tex, I got a question then.
Yes.
So group 1, which series are you going to have your eyes on, and which player not from that series do you have your eyes on?
Oh, I like that. Okay.
Spicy.
Group 1.
I mean, to everybody, but
I'm looking at CB Rookies versus Beyblades is my matchup that I really want to watch, because I'm invested in understanding what CB Rookies is going to bring to the table.
Maybe made.
Hashtag Nvidia mains.
And then player to watch. Let's see here. It might not be in the right group, but Skeleton from GSG. That's
in the
my
right group.
big player to watch. So that's my matchup and my player to watch. I'm excited for both of those.
Colonel, same question.
I'll do this a little out of order. I think Skeleton, I just has to be my player to watch. He was a monster week 1, and it's gonna be. I'm not excited to see him get smashed, but I'm a little bit excited for when that happens to see what the rest of the team can do. And my matchup for this week that I'm excited for is going to be GSG versus VBU. VBU had a big disappointing week 1, and GSG obviously looks to be one of the strongest competitors. We didn't get to talk about it too much because we talk a lot, but I think VBU's drafts were incredibly disappointing from a person that we all know the name of. The Bully is a name in the amateur community that people know from BOL. I don't know if he just took a sick day on Sunday or if he let his players do the draft, but these drafts were just horrific. Like they pick themselves into some of the worst counter picks possible and some of the worst win rate matchups by the numbers possible. Like Bully, if you were the one doing draft, or the players, if you guys were, it's really not too difficult. Just type in u.gg, type in your champ, and click counters, and then don't choose any of those champs. Don't pick yourself into a counter pick because it's such an easy thing to fix, and they did it every time. VBU. Okay, I'm probably talking too much, but Anivia, Lulu, Alawi, Kindred is the other team. And VBU says, you know what that team wants us to do? They want us to dive on them. So let's do that. And they picked Vi 5th pick. They picked Diana. Like what? They picked then game 3, that they got destroyed game 2 by playing into that. And then game 2, 2nd pick Lulu. And then 4th pick Alawi. And you know what they say? They say, for our red side, last pick, we're going to pick a Kali and Samira and try it again. Like, it's such a big problem that you guys have the right pieces. You have a lot of strong players. Those kind of mistakes are, honestly, they're unwarranted, and there's no bright spots in making a mistake like that. It's just plain and simple. If they clean that up, I think they can be such a good team, but that's just such a glaring mistake as of now.
So I'm going to jump in and highlight somebody that we haven't talked about. The person that I am watching this week from the Void is Jason KB23. This guy's going back to his main role. Clearly the standout player on his team. I really want to see what he does up against the Fallen University. I really, really am interested for that. As many people have said, Goon Squad versus VBU Titanium is my game to watch of the week there.
And Decker.
Yeah, so I can't pull up the matches or it will break our scene. So I'm not going to do that, but I will. So I don't know off the top of my head, but I will give you my player to watch. Who I'm excited about is Bot God. So Colonel was a Bot God stander last week, and he flew under the radar to me. And even though I don't think he's going to get super challenged, this week, I don't think it's going to be like a telling is he a top jungler or not, because they are going up against they're playing against. Where I just had that written down. Where's it at? They're playing against Abyssal, right? Abyssal Emerald, is that correct? Yeah. So their jungler didn't have the best week last week, and Bot God did, so there's a lot of momentum in his favor. But I want to see if he can outrace Swag to like my measuring stick for junglers for this group. So I'm excited to watch him play. Give us your .rfl files, and this isn't live. This is keeping.
So I'm going to switch up the question, because we are all really hyped for MIT versus FTD. I don't think that anybody's going to pick a different series except. Anyway,
No.
Question for Group 2. Which head-to-head matchup across Group 2 are you most excited for?
Just in theory or next week? Just like
player versus player, right?
Oh, got it.
For me, I'm super excited to see Snowy Faye versus Lespex. I'm really interested to see. These are two 80 carries that we're both really excited for. We both think that they're really important pieces to their teams, and seeing them go head to head, I'm really, really curious about which one comes out on top.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to sympathize and say, and I'm going to expand it a little bit more and just say the bot lane duos of those two teams. So just to loop in Self-Hate and Shadowfax.
For what great names. I think I have to root for Revolution because Lespanx and Fueled by Self-Hate is just such a great name combo. You can't root against them.
Truly.
It has to be. I mean, I hate to go on the same line of bot lanes, but it's the FTD and MIT bot lanes. I think both these bot lanes are nuts, and I think Chubby is going to probably be the best support in this division, just stats wise. But I think that the MIT, that YMZI is going to be able to contest that spot, and seeing those unconventional picks in the 80 carry role going up against Nerf, who hasn't died yet. I want to see it. I want to see that bot lane matchup so bad.
Yeah. I in the same game, but different players. Just because you guys are the banter haters, but Vinny versus Chinese Spy, I'm really hoping it's spicy because banter's popping off on the 30th, a day before. So just waiting for whatever happens to be an absolute pop off in banter. Whichever one of you wins this, please don't hold back.
Don't hold back.
And don't DM me what you said because I don't care. I don't care what happens in that godless place.
With that, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for week 2 of Silver Scraps. Excited to get into this week 2 matches on the 31st and to see what happens. Let's get some spicy banter from those two that we're talking about. Otherwise, everyone, good luck, have fun, kick some ass out there on the Rift. Thanks, everybody.
Good luck.